start recording. So just so everybody's aware, we'll record the meeting in the comments. That was just with a button.
We can respond at the end.
Okay.
Since the laptop's over there.
Yeah.
All right.
Michael, why don't you hang around?
And I will just, I'll just stand by the deck
Yeah.
just quickly, and I will say, feel free to interrupt me at any point. I'll try to go through these quickly. I just wanted to have a few sort of background slides. Also, if anybody can't hear, please speak up because we can't see the chat at this point. So basically, I wanted to show just a couple of graphs because I'm a nerd. This is some data over the last few years of EV sales in Illinois. You can see it's growing pretty rapidly. And we're up now, in 2017 we were below 10,000. We're now up now right about 80,000 vehicles on the road in Illinois. And we're in that top 10 states nationally in terms of EV adoption. You can see there's some big ones. Obviously, California is way out ahead, but we're doing our best to catch up here in Illinois. And part of that was the governor's goal of, as part of the Climate and Equitable Jobs Act, to get to 1 million EVs on the road by 2030. And so we're at 80,000 now. We're trying to get to 1 million by 2030. So think back to that graph I showed you on the first slide. This is the kind of curve we need to be on in order to meet that goal. And I made this slide for the first time last year, so you can see there's an overlap between the red dots and the blue line. We're actually following that trend so far. So when you think about the infrastructure and the needs and how much this is going to become an increasing issue going into the future, it's something we need to start planning for today to be ready down the road as these vehicles come online. And here's a graph of charging infrastructure. So this is the charging infrastructure in the state. You can see that it's also growing pretty exponentially. One thing to flag for folks, I'm not sure how familiar folks are with EV infrastructure. Are folks familiar with the difference between a level 2 port and a DCFC port? I'm seeing
I would say for this group, probably not.
Okay, so
maybe a little bit.
So level 2 ports, those tend to be what people have, there's community charging that's free to access. Those tend to be level 2s. They charge a vehicle, on the order of full charges over on the order of a few hours. These can be also what people have, the nice ones people have in their garages. The DCFC chargers, those are the fast chargers. So those are the ones that will charge, I think they're called direct current fast chargers. If you're curious about the acronym. Those charge a vehicle on an average EV into a full charge in about 20 to 30 minutes. So those are the chargers that are more similar to like if you pull into a gas station and you're going to charge and then get on the road again, versus where the level 2s are more, you park your car while you're in the office for the day and come and get it at the end of the work day.
From the standpoint of charges, so the DCFC, you pay for the electricity going into your car. Level 2, you don't.
It depends on how they structured it. I would say generally the DCFC stations they're much faster, but they're also much more expensive and they draw a lot more power. So it tends to not be economical to have a DCFC charger that's free for use. Those tend to have a fee, whereas the level 2 ones, those ones tend to be cheaper to install, cheaper to maintain, and so those ones tend to be the ones that people have them like provided for free. They'll be level 2.
I've seen some of those more advanced charging stations at dealerships.
Right.
And some of them do, but not all of them allow you to charge there.
Yes. Yeah, so you'll start to see, you can see this red bar here, those are the DCFC ports, and you can see that's starting to be a bigger part of the picture going forward. And because those are the things that, I think as we think about overcoming people's anxieties on, is there going to be, if I need to stop and charge on my road trip, is there going to be something where I can stop? That's really where the focus is of a lot of the federal money. There's still definitely a use for those level 2 chargers though. So I just wanted to kind of help distinguish that because it'll come up in some of these programs.
Isn't there a level 2 enhanced also? That's not quite as fast as the current is.
That I'm not sure of.
But it's like 10 times, like current.
Agreed, yes.
Yeah, and there's different power levels for these DCFC ports, so some of them will charge faster than others. So I'm trying to stay high level on the technical details, but give you all kind of a sense of, because these terms are going to come up as we talk about the different programs, what kinds of chargers are eligible, all that kind of stuff. So I hinted at this, but so why is public charging infrastructure important? The data that we have on current EV owners' use is that 80% of charging happens at home. And that's really where it tends to be economical for folks, because if you're doing this public charging, that tends to be more expensive. You lose some of the advantage of switching to an EV and the cheaper electricity. But when we talk to people, we hear really, really frequently that there's range anxiety and that availability of public charging infrastructure is one of the key things that's holding people back from buying an EV. Because they want to know that if they're on the road, they're not going to get stranded. So, and then the other piece just to note is there's also equity issues here. If you charge at home, if you've got a charger if you've got a garage, or that you can have a charger in, that makes that a lot easier. If you don't have a garage, you park on the street, if you live in an apartment building, there's going to be more need to rely on public charging. So that's why a lot of these programs are focused on public charging infrastructure as part of IIJA. And so the NEVI program, National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Program, as I mentioned, was part of IIJA. It's split into a couple of pieces. So there's the formula program, which is overall $5 billion split across all the states based on a big mathematical formula. Illinois gets 148 million of that over 5 years. There's a second pot of money, which is the $2.5 billion Discretionary Charging and Fueling Infrastructure Program, also known as CFI. I'm going to talk really briefly about the formula side here, just to give a sense of sort of what is covered by what the state is working on and what then is really strategic to start applying for some of these competitive programs. So both of these programs are designed to really jumpstart the private sector investment in fast charging. This is money that is likely going to go to the private sector to build and maintain these charging stations. They're not going to be owned by IDOT. They're going to be like in the parking lot, someone mentioned, the parking lot of an auto dealership, in a gas station, in a retail store, in a restaurant, in a hotel, those kinds of applications, places where people are already stopping. And the formula program has a lot of requirements on the types of chargers, the numbers, the power levels, all those sorts of things, the distance that they have to be. And our requirements as part of that program for the state is that we need to build out the alternative fuel corridors first, and then we have additional flexibility to spend that NEVI formula dollars in other parts of the state off those corridors. So what do I mean by the corridors? They're all of the roads marked in greens and yellows on this map. The greens and yellows are just how recently we nominated them and how far along they are in building out that infrastructure. The requirement is every 50 miles along these corridors, which are the interstates, no more than 1 mile off of the interstate. Kind of think like what goes on that sign when you approach an interstate, an interchange. And each station has to have 4 ports. They all have to be DCFC. They all have to have 150 kilowatts per port. So that's the formula side on the corridors. IDOT has been doing annual plans. We just recently did an update. It's been submitted to Federal Highways for approval. We identified 46 locations for building out this infrastructure to meet the definitions of fully built out, which is all those corridors every 50 miles, no more than 1 mile off the interchange. All these stars on this map represent approximate locations in the plan document itself, which is on IDOT's website. You'll see a little more detail on the exits that we think are going to be sort of, for each one of these, there's a group of exits that could be eligible. So you'll see there's 4 blue dots on this map. Those are the existing stations that meet those standards. And all those yellow stars are places we need to build more infrastructure. We think this is not going to take the whole of our NEVI formula funding, though. We're going to have funding left over. And at that point, we can start working beyond those corridors. And we've got temporary, tentative plans in the last NEVI plan update of what we think we want to do with what we think is going to be close to $100 million remaining. And what we're thinking of targeting is the U.S. routes and the scenic byways. So the U.S. routes are in red on this map. The scenic byways are in the dotted lines on this map. And we're thinking those will help build out the rest of the state, and especially focusing on some tourist destinations and places where there aren't interstates covering those roads yet. We haven't identified locations on that yet, but we want to start talking to people about, here's what we're thinking, getting feedback. Again, we won't be able to start on those other roads until we finish building all of those yellow stars. Yes.
I guess I'm a little confused. I guess when the original NOFO came out about what they were going to do with the $700 million, $350 million was going to go to communities, $350 million corridors, and that I thought those were going simultaneously. They weren't going to be
Yes.
$350 million for corridor and then $350 million for community.
Right.
So.
Right, we're still talking about the formula side here. So this is IDOT's pot of the money.
This is IDOT's spot. Okay.
Yes.
All right.
And
Nothing to do with the grant.
So the grant, we're going to get to that on, I think, the next slide.
Okay. I'm sorry. I just was thinking in terms of what.
Yeah, no, that's really helpful. I just wanted to give folks kind of a high-level view of here's where IDOT is working on building stations. And there, you can still see there's a lot of the state that's not covered. And there's a lot of the state that may not make sense to have, 4 ports, 150 kilowatts per port. There's going to be places where it makes more sense to focus on community level charging, maybe more of that stuff where people are going to be parked for longer times, and level 2 chargers. So that's where the discretion, I was right, this was my next slide. This is where the discretionary programs, also known as the Charging and Fueling Infrastructure Program. So as we were just saying, it's split into 2 halves. There's the community program, which is prioritizing rural areas, low and moderate income neighborhoods, communities with high rates of multifamily and low rates of private parking. But it's generally widely eligible for communities to say, we want to build charging in our communities. We've identified a site. We want some federal grant money to help us build this. There's another part of that program that is focused on those alternative fuel corridors. So this is additional funding to build out. So that could be a municipality that's on one of those corridors that maybe is not ideally placed for those every 50 miles, but says, we know we have some demand here, we'd like to build an additional station, that sort of thing. It's also an eligibility for hydrogen and other kinds of fueling that is more targeted toward medium and heavy duty vehicles.
I understand the DEI issue and the low and moderate income, but are low and moderate income families going to be able to afford Teslas? I mean, how does the state kind of reconcile that kind of conflicting issue?
Right, and I think that there is a huge affordability issue. There's some other programs that are going on, not at IDOT, but at other state agencies. There's an EV rebate that is, I think, priority for low and moderate income families for purchasing an EV. But I think that is going to continue to be a challenge as we see these deployed, is there's the desire to make sure that those communities don't get left behind, but also the supply and demand on EVs. So the text up here about what the priorities are, that's pulled from the federal NOFO. And so they didn't say that's the only communities that are eligible, but as they're reviewing applications, those are sort of the things that move your application to the front of the top of the pile. So the first round closed in June 2023. We're expecting the next round is going to come out in March, spring-ish timeline of this coming year and operate on a similar timeline going forward. And then I think I just have one more slide here, which is, this is like literally happened last week. There was a new NOFO. It's another federal highway administration program. It's they kept aside 10% of the overall NEVI funding to do kind of different things. They gave FHWA some discretion. And so they just released 100 million of this set aside that is available for repair of broken or unavailable existing charging infrastructure. So there's a federal website called the Alternative Fuels Data Center that shows where all the public charging is all over the country. And some of those stations, it keeps track of like which ones are up and running and which ones aren't, have some issue with them. And so this funding is specifically targeted to stations that have a maintenance issue, that are broken, they're unreliable. This is funding that we're trying to understand exactly what's eligible, but this period is open from now through November is the deadline. So just wanted to flag this one for you all. If you know of chargers in your community that exist but aren't functioning, this might be a funding source available.
Private chargers as well as chargers owned by a city or county, whatever.
Right, they must be available to the public. So if it's in it's an employer that has it in their garage and you can only use it if you're an employee, that doesn't count. But if it's available to the public, then it can potentially get funding through this program.
Yeah, you mentioned car dealerships.
Yeah.
They have their, for their own vehicles, they also allow people to pay. That would be a great opportunity for people to do that.
Yes. I will say with this program, the one thing is if you're upgrading a station, you need to meet the new NEVI standards. This is somewhat of a carrot to try to get some of the existing standards to help count towards some of these goals that we have. So that again, off the corridor, there's lighter restrictions, but if you wanted to build, you wanted to use this funding to turn a station that had like one L2 level 2 charger into a 4 DCFs, yeah.
But is the NEVI standard really fast charge? Isn't level 2 also a part of the NEVI? So at least with the grant program.
Correct.
So could it be either or?
Yes.
Okay.
So it depends on location. Again, if you're on one of those alternative fuel corridors, then you have to meet this pretty high bar, strict bar. If you're off of the corridors, you have much more flexibility. And that's why we've been kind of strategic about which roads we nominated as corridors, because we think there are going to be a lot of places where it might not be economically viable to do that big charging station, at least right off the bat.
Some of our colleges, charging stations are community college and private colleges are not. Would they be eligible to?
Potentially, and this would be where so the FHWA has this list that they put together based on what's on the Alternative Fuel Data Center website. And only stations on their list are going to be eligible. So this would be a great time. They're going to update that list between now and October, mid-October. So if you know of a station, I would check to see if it's on the website. And if it's not, there's probably a process. I'm not familiar with it, but get that wheel turning to try to get those stations eligible and on that list.
You kind of the same idea there. If it's on a junior college or a car dealership or a gas station, if you want to upgrade it, they only have 2 outlets. You want to upgrade 4. That would be the upgrade it so you've got more capacity, which you better be regulation.
Yeah.
I assume.
So So an upgrade, if the station works now, it would be eligible for, if it's near a corridor, it would be eligible for the formula funding that IDA is working on. If it's off of those corridors, it would be eligible for the community, the CFI community. And it would not be eligible for this new pot of money because if it's currently working, you can't use this money to upgrade it.
Okay, so we just got.
So, yeah. So I know there's a lot of detail here, but I just wanted to kind of give people a sense of like, that's the universe of funding. There's a lot of, things you can stick together. There's different, yeah.
Lots of layers,
Yes.
Federal program, state programs.
Yes. And I didn't even talk about some of the other state funding for charging, but this is enough. As I figured this was enough for now. So.
Just for benefit of people online, when you ask a question, so everybody can hear, we got microphones around the table. I'm looking at you because you're very soft spoken.
I know.
So give her a microphone. Right here. So anyway, so we have any questions from our online audience? Now's the time. For Elizabeth or any other things that were discussed thus far. Are you still awake? Give me a thumbs up.
Elizabeth, before you go, is there a chance to get some of your slides? I don't know if there's any proprietary information there, but especially the ones that shows the growth, because if you're going out and talking to people and say, hey, you really need to get in front of this because there is money available and eventually you're going to need it or you're going to impinge, what you're trying to accomplish with what you do.
I'm realizing I'm far from microphone. So I'll come back over here and say, yes, we can get you the slides. There's a copy on here. I'm happy to email it.
We'll if you're okay with us emailing
Yep.
out the slides, we'll make sure that everybody gets everything that was presented. Okay, Amy, do you have a question?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
So is the intent is to look at these, not these main roads, but anything that branches kind of off, like a wheel and spoke, like any of our communities that might have like a public lot or something like that to kind of tie into the system? Is that what we're kind of hoping for, something like that?
Yeah, I think you could look at a municipal lot that you want to put chargers in. You could also look to partner with businesses. What we've heard from people when we ask them, like, what do you care about if you're charging your vehicle? What would you like to see? People are really interested in there being things around. 20 minutes, 30 minutes isn't a huge amount of time, but it's long enough that people want to be able to use the bathroom. They want to, poke around in a store, something like that. So, a parking lot or a parking structure in a downtown that, people then kind of wander around a bit, that would be a great option. A parking, like some vacant land that's sort of surrounded by residential, maybe not as attractive, but potentially depending on what that residential is, there might be demand from those communities.
And Amy, the program, I watched them put it together for the city of Peoria. They're doing a really good job of putting it, with the college, junior college, and with the hospitals and other places. But the shopping areas, like what you've got out, in north of the city, there wasn't much in that area. So this is a layer on top of a basic layer that they put in place. And a lot of it was, the hospitals, disadvantaged communities, and those kind of things. But the shopping areas, I think there's a big opportunity to try to layer that in there and put it in with that overall equation. Would you agree, Mike?
Totally agree.
What about schools? How will this impact? So, like one of family's major activities is going to athletic events. And so what are our school districts? How will their funding come in?
That's a really good question that I haven't thought about much yet. There's a lot of work going on at the state on school bus and school bus charging, and that kind of because they're bigger vehicles, there's a bigger power demand, and there's a lot of work going on like garages, but I don't think that much thought has been put into, charging at a public school parking lot. I think that's a really interesting idea. IDOT worked on submitting an application for the corridor program, and we targeted community colleges that were close to that met those distance requirements. So I think that's a really interesting idea.
We also, as part of the CFI grant we put in, Peoria School District was part of the consortium of groups. So they initially looked at, hey, we'd like to have some at this school, at this location. And what they came back to was these charge stations have to be available 24/7. They got some pushback on having people go onto their property theoretically 24/7. So that's kind of a little touchy subject, I think. I think it works in the right situation, especially if you're talking, ICC, stuff like that. But so that it was definitely a discussion. That's definitely something to consider.
Going along with it, park districts might be something.
Park district.
I mean, you may have a restriction of going into the whole park, but there's usually something outside that you might be able to hook into.
And they're definitely eligible government entities. Like they're eligible for this type of funding.
Yep.
How about libraries?
Yep. Libraries too.
Why don't we transition into Michael? And thank you, Elizabeth. And Elizabeth's obviously going to be around the rest of the meeting. And you don't have to. Okay, that's good. You can sit down. I don't think there's the point of this is Elizabeth gives sort of the high level sort of state view on this in the federal programs. Michael has specific experience with this grant application that we would be going through. As we've already indicated, the city of Peoria hired the services of Dewberry, and they already had an existing contract with them at the time, but this sort of came out of nowhere, and Mayor Ali's efforts of bringing a coalition of local stakeholders together, primarily on the Peoria County side of the river, and primarily sort of within the city, that was the focus of that effort. And I think, well, Michael can tell you about sort of the details of what that grant consisted of, but why don't you start? I don't want to.
Yeah, no, you're good. You're good. So first of all, Elizabeth, great stuff because you got the first half of what I was going to talk about done. So we'll go right through that. I will add a few details as far as what came out of our grant application, just to give you guys some context. Our grant writer in her research of the area, the number of charging stations is very limited here that are available 24/7 to the public. She found a database that said Peoria County has about 900 electric vehicles registered in Peoria County, and there's 12 publicly available charging stations that people can access. So there's definitely a dearth of charging stations in this regard. Just to give you an idea, so there's level 1 chargers, level 2 chargers, and then the DC FC fast chargers. Just to give you a little idea, this is the research that we found. I'm sure there's different numbers all across the internet. But just a level 1 charger. This is what probably most people have at home. Plug it in, trickle charge it over the night, and you're ready to go the next day as long as you don't have a big trip. You plug those things in for an hour, and you get about 5 to 10 miles of range on your charge. So it's not great, but it's enough that if you charge it overnight, you got 40, 50, 60 miles to get you to and from work. It's perfect for a lot of people. Level 2 charger. These are typically 240 volt for residential electrical services, and you charge those for an hour. You're talking about 25 miles to 30 miles of additional charge you get. So you're getting sufficient. Say you go to a restaurant, you want to sit down for an hour or two, and you can plug in somewhere. You've got 25 to 50 miles worth of additional charge. I think it's great in those settings where you just kind of pop in, pop out of a restaurant, of a shopping center, whatever. I think that's really good. Really, and where we're getting better is those fast chargers. And again, the stuff that we found, 200 to 250 miles for an hour of charge probably is a little on the lighter side, but that's some of the range we found. So if people want their electric vehicles to function like a gas station, we need a lot more of these. And I think that's what would get people over the hump of saying, you mentioned hesitancy, get us over the hump of saying, yeah, I can definitely see myself driving one of these. So just as this technology emerges, and the federal government does this with everything, is you get this, they just want to push it along with different funding and all that stuff. So just some of the nuts and bolts of this CFI discretionary fund, what we found was, and this is dependent on who you're representing and who you're here interested in, there's a cost share to this. So this isn't something that's 100% free. This is a typical 80-20 split on the funding. But it's a reimbursement program. It's very critical to understand because you'll have to possibly front the entire cost for all of these charging stations once they're built up to NEVI standards or whatever standard you have to hit. Then you get the reimbursement of the 80% on the back end. So that's, as municipalities consider this, it's definitely something you have to factor into your budget if you're thinking next year, whatnot. You have to make sure you have that money to front that. But the eligible project costs are big. I mean, it's not only the station and the equipment. It's if you have to buy land, design and planning of it, that kind of stuff is included in that. So where we got with the initial grant for our CFI for the city of Peoria back in June, it was almost exclusive. And I say almost exclusive because there was a lot or two that wasn't owned by that particular municipality. So it was almost exclusively looking at park districts, libraries, ICC, municipal owned land. And so what that does is it's great because that is land that you own, you control what you want to do with it. The downside of it is it's not targeting any of those shopping centers, any of those high traffic areas. It's not hitting those. And those are the most attractive sites, I think, to different suppliers like EVgo and that kind of thing. So it's probably, there's a balance between the reality of we need to get more sites at those locations, at Targets, at Walmarts, that kind of thing. So it's something that we'll hit next time around, I'm sure. So
Mike,
yeah.
step there, and maybe Elizabeth has some comments on this. What if the community is sort of the opinion that the private sector is going to take care of that? Huck's or Casey's or BP or whatever gas station or whatever large business that's sort of located everywhere, Dollar General even, they're going to put these in. We don't have to worry about it.
So I would say, I think that they are going to be really great partners in all of this, and that these federal programs can be a really good way to match that investment from those places. So a local match doesn't have to necessarily be from a municipality. And in fact, on the corridor side, they're requiring that it's the private sector that puts that match in. And so I think that there's a lot of opportunity to say, hey, we're gonna, you got to work through all the procurement related rules related to this, right? But to say, like, we want to partner with something like a Casey's and do an application together and say, we're gonna, go get the federal money, and maybe Casey's puts up 50% and the feds put up the other 50%, something like that. So it's really not on the municipality, but you end up with a bigger investment and better chargers, more chargers than Casey's might have done just by themselves.
So for Electrify America or these charging companies that are coming in, are they identifying their sites where they want to go, or is it that kind of public-private partnership that's spurring that?
Yeah, it's going to be, my sense is it's going to be like a public-private partnership situation, because the landowner is really critical, because that's often who's talking to the utilities, and you're going to need to make sure that the power levels are sufficient to the site, because that can be an expensive process and also a time-consuming process to kind of get that infrastructure in place. So the landowner is important, and then you've got the charging equipment manufacturer, and then for a lot of these, you're also going to want someone who's going to be responsible for the maintenance to make sure that charger doesn't end up on the list of temporarily unavailable going forward, because I don't think that funding source is going to be available for all that long. So getting someone under contract, maybe it's the landowner, maybe it's the charging equipment manufacturer, maybe it's a third company, to make sure that those stations are working and that they've got a guy that they can call when something breaks down, a guy or a gal.
And to build on that, Elizabeth, it's great stuff. When we talked with the ChargePoint and whoever, we talked to several different suppliers during putting together our application. And they were big on, if you can find us a good location, I think those high traffic locations, they would put up the 20% match. Like they are looking for a place to do it. And they have partners that will do the maintenance for it. So none of the municipalities or anybody we worked with wanted to own and maintain these things. They were like, that's fine. We want to provide it as an amenity to our community, but we don't want to own and maintain a gas station, right? So it was that same thing as long as the locations are good and the traffic is good, they're all for putting up the 20% and getting those things in, because they'll make their money back on the back end. If that makes sense.
So do
No, you're good. I like this. This is good.
Does anybody have any idea, like we talked about East Peoria. East Peoria has it in their shopping centers and at their library. Are those a level 1 or a level 2? Or I know they're not a level 3.
bring that up on the map. We've got a map of all the charging stations in the region. We're going to have to share it now. Just go ahead and zoom into East Peoria.
East Peoria side.
Where were we at?
Yeah, any of those, levy district or library.
Great though, for like what you said. I mean, you can go into a meeting, you could run into Target, and you just get a little. Yeah, they're great location. It doesn't say what level they are. Yeah, the Holiday Inn.
J7.
Click on the more details. Says unknown.
Judging from that, I'm pretty sure that's a level 2, because the J1772, that's the type of connector that connects to the car. And there's a version of that is the same as sometimes you'll hear them called CCS chargers. I think it's called Combined Charging Standard. And I think it's J1112, some other text on the end. Or 772, yeah, text on the end. You may have heard the Tesla standard versus the CCS standard. That's sort of an ongoing thing in the industry. Right now, all of the federal programs, you have to have be open to the sort of a open standard. And right now, CCS, this J1772, that's the open standard. Tesla is working toward that, but they haven't got there yet.
And they have an adapter they put over so they can use that right on there. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, so there's a couple strategies that Tesla is employing to try to get their stations to qualify for some of this NEVI funding.
So just some specifics on what we submitted with the previous grant application. Like I said, it was a City of Peoria, Peoria County, West Peoria, City Link, ICC, Peoria Heights, Peoria Park District, Peoria Public Schools. There was about between 110 and 120 charging ports that were proposed. Total cost of the total request for the grant application was $10 million. So it's a good chunk. It really would have changed the landscape around here if we get it. And we'll find out. From what I understand, it's about a 6-month turnaround. So maybe end of the year, something like that. We'll figure it out.
I hope you get it, because if you don't get it, I don't know how anybody else is going to be able to.
I know.
With all the things you did and all the ways you put together.
So we'll see. But again, like I said, this is not a moneymaker for anybody. This is all, we're just trying to provide an amenity. Somebody else will obviously make money on it. But we're just trying to say, citizens, this is an amenity to you. So some of the project merit criteria for what they're looking for. So in the future, I'm assuming this will not change for the next round of it. It'll be the same, but safety, they want to make sure these things are sited in a safe location. If you're right next to a high accident location that's friendly, they just don't want to add any more issues to that area. Obviously, climate change, resilience, sustainability, they're trying to improve that. Obviously, this is where equity, community engagement, and Justice 40 areas. Any community, any part of the community that's been disadvantaged for a while and typically doesn't get the amenity to all the services that they want. 40% of all the charging stations had to be placed in these types of areas.
40% of each grant application or 40% of charges in the whole program?
Part of this grant application.
Okay, so
Yeah, so the Justice 40 program, it's a federal program. It's basically that it's an executive order that says for all of these new investments in clean energy, transportation, et cetera, 40% of those benefits need to go to disadvantaged communities. They're still working on quantifying what are all the benefits? How do you quantify 40% of them? But that means that in a lot of these programs, there's a priority for those communities. And the more your application can, provide benefits, demonstrate benefits, the more competitive your application is going to be.
They also specify for rural communities. Does that replace a disadvantaged community in that regard? I mean, that was a target that they had too, or you're saying even if you're doing in rural communities, it's got to be 40% disadvantaged. We're going to have a real difficulty, putting that in Elmwood, for example.
Agreed.
I will say a lot of rural communities do show up as disadvantaged.
That's why you look at disadvantaged. Is it census tract household or?
Yeah, they're identified. There's a map. There's a USDOT map. There's also the Council on Environmental Quality, White House Council on Environmental Quality map that show disadvantaged communities that can be sort of are you located in one of these? Yes, no. So those are good things to look at. A lot of it's gone now, but on my slide deck there was a map that had like purple communities highlighted. All of those communities were USDOT's transportation disadvantaged communities, and they were kind of all over the state. Yeah.
And we looked at the census tract information when we evaluated that part of it. So,
Kinga, you have a couple questions?
Yes, I do. Thank you. I wasn't sure when to interrupt. So Mike, a couple questions for you, and I'm just going to throw it all out there, and I'll let you answer back as convenient for you. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So Michael, you mentioned that we're possibly going to hear back from the other grant by end of this year. It looks like the deadline for this one is November. So what would be the recommendation for the communities who have applied for that other grant? And then if we get, let's say we get approved with the other grant, would that be a possibility for us to apply for both and then pull out of one of them, just to make sure between the two chairs we're not sitting in the middle? And then the other question, are you guys planning to do this grant kind of similar as the Peoria ones to try to find somebody for that 20%? So those are it.
So I'll answer your second question first. If we're unsuccessful in getting the grant, what we do is we get a debrief from the federal government and just make sure we understood clearly why we weren't selected, and then we would then address any deficiencies in our application that way. So in general, yes, we'd probably approach it the same way. I thought our approach was solid, but I'm not going to bury my head and say it was perfect. So we'd probably want to get that debrief and figure out what we need to improve on it. In regards to the consecutive grant applications, you're talking, when you say November, you're talking about the one that replacement. Okay.
Replacement repair.
Yeah. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I would say that's not the focus of this grant. That's too soon. We probably wouldn't be prepared to be able to do that by November.
Correct.
Our focus is the one that's probably targeted for the release at March of next year. So a 6 or 8 month time frame from now.
Yeah, and I would just send, the order of magnitude, there's $100 million available for that November one, and it's targeted on very specific stations, which may or may not even be in your communities already, versus what, $350 million was the last round for the community program. So that would be where I would focus the one that's going to be in the spring, unless you sort of already know of one that you're dying to get fixed.
Just to be clear, I think our focus is the one next spring, and that's what the intention of this meeting is for.
Perfect, thank you. Yeah, one of the slides I thought I seen a November date. It could have been just me. So that's why I wanted to make sure that the two timelines are kind of falling right after each other. So that helps a lot. Thanks.
Yeah, I guess the question that I sort of can envision is that if we understand that the city of Peoria was unsuccessful in their grant application, could we, and we have enough runway to include them on a future grant application, could we just submit a larger pool than maybe just us at that point? And I would say, yeah, if the money bears it and the application bears it, why not? Yes.
Elizabeth, which one of those? It was either the corridor or the community one that didn't have a cap on it, didn't have a limit. Was it the corridor?
The corridor program. Yeah, I would say I don't know for sure, but my sense is that the community program is likely to be very, very competitive because it's eligible for lots of different things. The corridor program is going to be bigger sites. And my sense is they did not give us a lot of time to pull together applications. I know a lot of states didn't submit ones. So that one I think will be less competitive this time around. But I think, yeah, going forward, I think a lot of that is going to go to hydrogen development, actually.
And the reason I ask that is, we had a $10 million grant application. If they come back and say, well, we're looking for bigger swings at it, we're looking, we funded $30 million projects. That's where it makes sense. Let's bring it. Let's make this one big group and bring in as many people as we can. But I don't know if that's the feedback we'll get.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. The corridor, the community program did have a maximum. It was like 10 or 15 million. I want to say.
Yes, I think it was 15.
15. So yeah, we'll learn more soon whether they are more excited about like big groups of applications that add up to 15 million, or if they want to fund a bunch of little ones. We'll learn.
It's the charge points that people said they don't want they don't want the 400,000 or the 25,000 or whatever it might be. Now, that may change depending on how they evaluate people and who gets the
Yep. Agreed. And that's basically everything I went through. Just the one thing, just to kind of give you an order of magnitude, the difference between a level 2 charger and a level 3 charger, just ballpark numbers. And obviously a lot of this depends on what your site looks like and what your existing facilities and utilities at that site look like. But a level 2 charger can be installed for 20, 25 grand. Those DC FC fast chargers are a couple $100,000 each. Like just the equipment is so expensive, all that stuff. So, it's definitely something that obviously let's get as many fast chargers as we can, but that's sometimes hard because they are pretty expensive.
Just one thing that we attempted to do, and we were not successful, is to have the local utility at the table, Ameren, and we did reach out to Ameren, and they did not respond, or I don't know if they ever responded.
Never responded to me.
Yeah. So that's obviously a part of this, and we're willing to sort of, if we want to move forward with this, we're willing to sort of go back to them and try to get them to the table to see what their part in all this is. But I guess, from a local community standpoint, planning standpoint, Elizabeth mentioned the infrastructure that's needed to do this. If I'm Chillicothe sitting over there and I have a perfect site in my head where I think I would like one to go, how do I know the infrastructure's available and there, and we can move forward with that site? I'm not wasting my time thinking about a site that's not possible.
I think you found that level 2s were pretty easy to.
Yes, absolutely.
I don't know about the level 3, the fast charger.
We did have some discussions with Ameren for a previous site location study we did for the city of Peoria. And what they said was generally anywhere you want to put it within the city. All right. So they're not, we weren't talking about rural areas or anything, but because we were just looking in the city at that point. And they said, 95 times out of 100, it's going to be pretty easy to get the required power you need there. Sometimes they said it depends on where you're at, especially downtown, it's a little wonky. But they said maybe they'd have to pull some new wire from X to Y in order to get the power requirements up where it needs to be. But in general, I don't know that it's going to be a huge issue with Ameren within the city, but great questions on, some other places, maybe more rural.
Okay, we have a question from the board. Amy, you want to say your question or you want me to read it? How is the upkeep and maintenance responsibility handled?
Consumer calls. They call the company and complains and they come right out.
Yeah, I think that's what's going to need to be negotiated in these contracts. We're working on that with the NEVI program as we get ready for the first NOFO, is trying to understand how do we first understand what the agreements are between all the companies as they submit applications for us to compare and select the winning ones. And then second, how do we then codify that in our contracts or whatever to make sure that they meet, there's federal reliability standards. And then we're going to need to make sure they meet those and come up with sort of what happens if they don't. So we're working on that, but it's a very open question.
And Amy, in the grant application, what we did is we assigned, with feedback from the suppliers, from the EV equipment suppliers, we X number of dollars a year for upkeep and maintenance. And that's something that they were responsible for. Well, let me back up. It's required for a 5-year period as part of this. It's not like you can get the money, put this thing in, and then not maintain it. You're required to maintain it for 5 years. But then after that, if they're the ones that are owning and operating these machines, they're going to be the ones that want to keep them up to date because they want to make money off them. So as long as it's not, if it was owned and maintained by the city of Peoria or whoever, that might be an issue because city of Peoria, is not in that business. But these OEMs, this would be their responsibility for that. That's how I take it, Elizabeth.
Yeah.
It sounds like it would need an intergovernmental, some sort of agreement with, because I don't want to say this is a bad word, funneling, but like we're the pass-through. Yep. The local agencies are the pass-through.
Yep.
Okay.
Good. Well, and the other thing, there's going to be some sort of easement, I think, granted if they have equipment that's on your property. They're going to want, and the county or city, whoever's going to want also an easement that allows them to come onto your property and maintain those machines as they need to. And I think part of that agreement would be, you guys are responsible for the operation and maintenance of this equipment, that kind of thing. So it doesn't fall in disrepair. That makes sense.
Okay. Thank you.
Michael, on the one for the Peoria program, you haven't selected a vendor yet or a supplier. And so that wouldn't happen until after you basically get the contract or you get the grant.
Correct.
Right?
Yep.
Yeah, and you're going to want to go through, they're trying to make it a little easier on the federal side, but this is USDOT, Federal Highway Administration money, which if those of you who have familiarity of working with that, there's lots of hoops to jump through around competitive, like rules for competitive procurements and all that kind of stuff. So they understand that this is kind of a new area and we're trying to figure it out, and that this is really, as someone said, a pass through in a lot of cases to the private sector to people who haven't worked with USDOT money before. So we're all on a learning curve, and I think everyone's trying to figure out how to make it work, but you might run into some interesting issues along the way.
What was your conversation like with the auto dealers in town? Like, did they have any advice or suggestions on the part of the consumer's needs? Because it seems like to me that every vehicle has a different program that they're affiliating that purchase with. Does that make sense? So like my Volkswagen is an Electrify America. If I go to an Electrify America, it's free. But if any other charging station I have to pay, which, it's still really affordable, but, those kinds of different consumer demands are a part of this too.
And we didn't get into a lot of that with our grant application. And the interesting thing to me of this whole thing is conformity of charging. If you've got different types of charging ports, you may know more about this than I do, but I'd have to talk to our designers, but different types of charging ports, you got Teslas, you got different adapters that you need for different things. I don't have a good understanding of that, but I would think that would all have to go into the design of these stations to make sure they're applicable to as many vehicles as we can.
Yeah, a lot of the stuff is being set by the feds in terms of what are their rules. There's requirements around, you have to be able to pay for them. I haven't looked too far into the details, but the general premise is you should be able to pull up to a charging station and be able to pay for it, even if you're not like signed up with ChargePoint.
And you can, but that mix of preference that people might have was what I was I didn't know if you would just go with one company flat out or you would try to go to different, because, yeah, there's so many different brands out there.
So how does that process work at the state level? Is this the procurement of that partner? Is it a bid? Is it, hey, we're going to work with XYZ company, or how are you guys going to select that?
Yeah, so our plan is to do a grant program and to award grants to specific locations. Basically, you saw those stars on the map. There's 3 or 4 exits, say, that are along near enough to that star that would meet the every 50 miles. So what our plan is to do is to say, okay, we'll submit, we'll take in applications from partnerships of a company and a site host and a maintenance group and we'll pick one within those 4 exits that will be the one that we conditionally award funding to. It's very similar to what Pennsylvania has done. They've done their first round of selections. So if you want to kind of see what they did, that's one of the models that we're looking at. They selected a mix of vendors. So they didn't say, like, ChargePoint is going to do all the ones in the state. They had a kind of smattering. I think that's probably a sensible approach, not to put all eggs in one basket.
Okay.
Yep.
Unfortunately, I do also have to hit the road a little bit early.
No,
but you all have my contact info.
Yep.
Feel free to email me.
Yeah, just any final questions for Elizabeth before we let her go from the group?
I have one, maybe Elizabeth and Mike, maybe I just been sleeping at the electrical outlet, but I have not seen a side-by-side comparison if I buy a $60,000 Tesla and it takes this much a year and I drive these many miles versus a Toyota Celica or whatever you want to put in there. And to say the electric costs you half of what a gasoline powered vehicle of the same type of equipment. Is that kind of, because that would seem to me to impact that trajectory, because if it says, geez, or if it's a scale that says, okay, we're at $4 a gallon now, $5 a gallon, $6, $10 a gallon, okay, then it just, it switches over, whatever. Has the industry done that kind of analysis?
Yeah, there's a ton of that analysis. I've built some spreadsheets to try to figure that out for various other jobs and math problems. But so there's a ton of that analysis out there. A lot of it has happened in California for their rulemaking. So they've got the best term to search for is total cost of ownership. I'm sure that there's like an EV total cost of ownership calculator out there. And the reason why total cost of ownership is important is it's not just your charging and then the upfront cost of the vehicle, but it's also the maintenance that goes along the way. And so there are a few different organizations that I think have done averages, and I'm sure there's a calculator out there somewhere, but I don't know what it is off the top of my head.
The other twist in that is from what I'm talking about. If you go to one of these fast chargers and you basically, fill your battery up at that fast charge, the cost of the electricity is fairly equivalent. At least it was at like $3.50.
Yeah.
So if you're charging at home all the time and you never go to any of these fast chargers, then your cost is going to be a lot lower. But if you feel you have to go and get fast charging all the time, it's going to be substantially higher from what I remember. So it's kind of like everything here. It's an exponential curve of all these things coming together.
Yeah, so there's a lot of different variables, and that's a really important one. Yeah, that if you're going to charge at home, the cost of ownership is you already come out ahead. And then there's of course what's the cost of an EV going to be down the road. As that I think the assumptions are all that curve is going to come down and those costs are going to come down.
I think the two variables. The two variables you're talking about are cost of the vehicle and then how many miles you're getting out of that battery. Because I don't know what it is now, but from what I understand, the batteries are getting better and better and better. all stuff I've gone through in my head as well.
Are you going to be at the brand conference?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I guess that's the other plug is that we're gonna, the fall planning conference is coming up. If you're attending, we'll see you there.
So,
We're gonna do an workshop.
For those online, Brandon has left and Elizabeth's leaving, but there's going to be an EV charging workshop at the IDOT Fall Planning Conference. That's going to be down in Springfield, October 2nd, 3rd, and 4th. That's a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. The EV charging workshop is on Monday. Monday afternoon. So if you'd like to attend that, Elizabeth and her crew will be there. There'll be some other discussion. Right. But maybe a more robust discussion down in Springfield. The attendance is free. You just need to sign up. And I'm sure they'd be glad to accommodate you. We'll get a link out to the people on this list today after this meeting. Thank you, Elizabeth. Do you have anything more?
Nope, that's all I had.
I guess, the point of this discussion is informational and all. But I guess what Tri-County's role in this is obviously more than calling a meeting together. Is there an interest in pursuing this particular grant from a combined standpoint? And is Tri-County interested in leading that? We don't have to be involved with it. We're glad to be involved with it. We may even go as far as to pay for some of it if I ask my chairman nicely and he can get the board to agree. Maybe not pay for all of it, and that would be pay to have the development of the grant, where we would hire a firm such as Dewberry to basically develop that grant like they did with the city of Peoria. I know we had limited participation in this meeting. I was a little bit surprised. We did advertise it. We sent it to 1,200 different people on our email list. We reminded people. We sent it to all the mayors of the region one more time, and Kathy had gotten the word out. And I'm not sure what the lack of interest is, but I appreciate the people that are interested in. And just because we don't have a room full of 65 mayors here doesn't mean that we're not interested in doing it. Perhaps a smaller group is better. I don't know. But I'd like to hear from you all of where you would like to take this and where you'd like me to take this in particular with moving forward with a grant application. And obviously education is the first thing, and we're willing to host more meetings. We're willing to bring in experts. We're willing to get a hold of the Ameren person, or maybe bring in some of the vendor people to sort of give their pitch on these things. We are wide open for suggestions and or anything. So I'd like to hear from you all.
I can share just a little bit of what Havana's conversation has been about it, is that they're thinking maybe one charging station in Havana, and so that they would just take that out of their budget. But I think they're thinking lower end, the level to charging station would be what they would pursue. And so maybe, additional conversation and education would be important. In the back of my mind, I'm wondering whether it's, 2 or 3 would probably be the max, and 2 might be too many, for a community like Hannah City or Elmwood, but I think there's interest in many of those small communities to make this happen. And the funding, would have to help in kind of bringing that online. But I don't know, that's my opinion, my view, based on the conversations that I've had so far with communities.
I'm going to echo that sentiment just a little bit, not so much as the number, the cost. We weren't aware that it was $200,000. City of Chillicothe wasn't aware that it was $200,000 for like a level 3 charger. So I would have to go back to committee and to council and say, okay, what do you want to invest? And I was thinking, so we do have a spot picked out, and it's our public parking, and it's behind our historic downtown. And it gives the access exactly what we've been talking about, where when people have to charge, they need something to do so they can go get something to drink, go to the bathroom, visit some shops, just stay active, and then go get the car. So I would definitely have to ask what their opinion is. I believe they were thinking about maybe 4 to 6, but when you're looking at $200,000, then they're going to have to say,
6,000
so no.
investment?
n-
4 to 6 chargers.
4 to
Okay,
6
four.
chargers, we have, because we have 2 different lots. So yeah, like maybe 2, 3, or 4 here, 2, 3, or 4 here. It just depends. That was just like a quick number that they talked about. However, when you're looking at this, if we're going to do it, it seems that we would want to go the highest level, because just with anything, you know how computer technologies quickly get updated, and they want it now. And also it's going to be updated and it's going to be bigger and better. So you may as well just get the best up to what we could afford. So I'll take this information, which has been very valuable to come in, and it's good things for me to take back to my council to see what their thoughts are based upon this.
And just to clarify, the NEVI standard is what you hear kind of thrown around, especially for, I believe, the corridor program. The NEVI standard is that you have 4 ports. Like you can't have just 1 or 2 sitting out there. You have to have 4. Now, but what you're talking about is the community program for Chillicothe. So
Right.
I just want to make sure I clarified that if.
Thank you.
Would those 4 charging have to be together? So she talked about 2 separate lots.
They would have to be together, but they could be a mixture of level 2 and DCFC.
So what would sort of the, small town minimum investment in the level 2 ports be?
I think for a 4 ports,
Yes.
level 2, you're probably talking 80 to 100,000.
80 to 100, which,
And that's the full price, obviously, if
Right.
you get 80% reimbursement.
so
Install and everything, or is that just?
Yes,
the equipment?
yeah.
So for each parking.
Yeah, the equipment's about half of that, right? And the installation's probably the other.
Yeah, and there's some money in there for operation and maintenance costs, that kind of stuff.
I know that they've got a few of these in Hy-Vee over on Sheridan. Has there been any monitoring of, what are they doing? Because I've been there sometimes early morning and I see, 4 Teslas or whatever parked there and the place is empty. I mean, there's nobody around shopping or anything, but
Right.
Is that monitored or who does that?
That's a great question, but I think that's part of some of these NEVI standards as well. Is you need to have a monitoring of this. I mean, obviously you need the Wi-Fi or fiber optic connection so people can pay with credit card and all that stuff. And I think there's a way to monitor usage and all that stuff, but not that I know of at that location.
That cost include the infrastructure to get, or is that just the station and the installation? What about getting the infrastructure there so you have power?
Yeah, it does include that up to a certain level. So if you've got a power shorts near, it includes some cost to run cable and wire and set a foundation and all that stuff, and the transformer and all that stuff you'd need. If you have to bring power from 4 blocks away, it doesn't include that. So it's it's kind of a general number, but I think it's a good ballpark.
I've got another question. So I'm sure that our library is pursuing some of this. Our school may be considering it. Would it be prudent to have an intergovernmental agreement that we all get on board and come in with a higher amount? Like, let's say we're only going to do 8, but they're thinking of some and school's thinking of some. So would it be better to say, hey, Chillicothe needs 24 or Chillicothe needs?
I don't think we're limiting this to just municipals here with park districts or other special units of government want to be involved. We're certainly open to that. I mean, there's nothing preventing them from being involved and joining in the discussion. So let sort of everybody know that might have an interest in community that they're certainly welcome to the table to hear more about it, decide whether they want to, if it's right for them.
The indication was bigger was better. right? As far as trying to win the grant. And so
That's my impression.
the more people that you can bring into the equation, the more opportunity you can bring.
Yeah. Michael, you mentioned that the city of Peoria led application was $10 million. How many ports, how many
I think-
installations was that?
If I remember right, I think it was like 116 ports.
116 ports.
29 locations, right?
Yeah, 26, I think.
26.
Yeah.
And I think at that time, when we were first discussing it, it was like, well, how are we going to limit ourselves to $15 million? And then all of a sudden we're at $10 million and we could have went up more than 5. And we tried to throw everything at it. So I think if there's just 6 of us doing this, 6 rural towns, I don't think we're going to be successful. I think we need to get some numbers up.
I can make that happen in my community. I've got people that I can talk to and get a much larger amount rather than just coming in and saying, I only need 8.
Yes.
So I need as much as possible, including talking to the private sectors and seeing if I can get some of them to show an interest.
So we did have some of that from Peoria Heights. They identified 2 different locations that were private. We got letters of support from that particular property owner that said I would have 4 chargers on this location. I'll work with the city, that kind of thing. So, that's all good. I think we can start. It's something that was not greatly considered, but I think it was considered a little bit of, working some of the private properties as well. So I don't think that hurts.
That wasn't the emphasis when
Correct.
City of Peoria got started with it. But I think bringing in Peoria Heights was a good addition because it brought that.
Yes.
What kind of businesses were those?
One was a gas station that's just going in right now, and the other one was
Heritage Square.
I think it was, yeah,
Heritage Square,
I think so.
where
Let me think about that. I can't remember what the second one was. It might have been Heritage Square, but anyway, but it's something that it's
where Poor Brothers is. That's what.
That's great, yeah.
Where the beer drinking place is.
That's one location that would have.
Pizza place right there.
I just sit over there all day and just
Charge your vehicle.
charge my vehicle and charge myself.
So you have an autonomous vehicle taking you home.
sorry, it's not done yet. I got to drink another beer.
How much you got? What's a gallon of beer cost?
Eric,
Go ahead.
I have a quick question. So you said you were hoping for a little bit larger group to discuss this. Would this be something that maybe the commission could talk about under other, or as just a discussion at your next meeting?
I definitely think so. We have talked about it in terms of that we're hosting this meeting. I think perhaps maybe we make it a little bit more formal of an agenda item to poll the mayors and the county board members that sit on our commission, what their interest is. And, we had a MPO technical meeting this morning, and I was sort of giving people grief about not signing up for the meeting. And a lot of the overall sort of impressions that I was getting is that this program is our council doesn't support this sort of investment. And I was sort of like, well, that's weird, because free money out there, or there's not free money, but there's available money out there. But it was sort of like, yeah, this is being pushed from, this side of the aisle, and we're more conservative. And I was just sort of, I think some education needs to take place about sort of the ramp that Elizabeth showed, the curve that Elizabeth showed, because they're going to be getting phone calls about, hey, there's not enough charging stations and I can't get from wherever I'm going because I'm out of electricity or my battery's dead and that sort of thing.
I think it's more about business expansion than it is green, energy, conservation. I mean, it has a combination of both, but this is how do you grow a business with electric vehicles that people are probably going to want at some point in time.
I agree.
If you can provide an amenity to your citizens, even though not all will use it, for 20 cents on the dollar, it's not a bad thing to take a look at.
We do have an elected official on the line, Eric Lind from the city of Eureka, the mayor. Eric, do you have any comments? I know you're listening in. I don't know if you're at work or not, just sort of listening in on the side. But I'd appreciate to see what your viewpoint is.
Yeah, thanks, Eric. Just listening in to, gather more information and details. We've had some conversations about various grants that have come up through the years, about potentially adding a couple chargers around town, either at the park or around our downtown area where we have event spaces and people coming in and potentially staying overnight. But obviously just, cost prohibitive. So, seeing there's grant opportunities out there kind of piqued my interest. I would comment on, maybe what some of the other mayors have said to you. I'm not sure what the feedback would be from my council. We haven't actually brought it to that level yet, but I know sometimes, I think there's misconception about, we're putting chargers in for free charging or people don't have to pay for them. And I've heard the argument of, if I have to, pay to put gas in my tank, so you have to pay for the charger. So I think I think you're right. There's a lot of misconception around, what this looks like or what it could be. I think there's also a level of concern too about municipality owning these, having to maintain them. So it was interesting to hear the conversation around, what's sort of next steps once we get the chargers in, where do they go from there? Who do we hand them off to take over the maintenance and ownership of them? Because I'm not sure that's a business, we want to be involved in. So yeah, overall, just, looking to gather more information and see where this might go.
Also, just a quick update from Pekin. I know our council has talked about it and they are seemingly generally supportive. I know we were kind of looking at level 2 chargers and putting some in our public parking lots that are just off of our downtown, right off the state highway. I think they're in an ideal spot. If there is money available, I think we are probably interested in upgrading to level 3 if that's what we think will provide the best opportunity for winning that grant. I mean, I don't think we would pay for level 3 on our own. We might end up paying for level 2 on our own if we can't get grant money, but I think that's kind of where we're at. So we're very, very interested in if a group is formed to kind of go after a larger dollar amount. I think we have a better chance, and I kind of doubt that the city of Pekin would be successful on our own with an application for 3 or 4 chargers. So looking forward to see what everybody else thinks long term.
Thanks, Josie. Derek. Derek is the Limestone Township Supervisor, and I think this sort of hit him out of the blue. Maybe he just got sort of strong-armed into signing up this morning. Derek, I don't know if you're listening, but have any thoughts or comments?
Yeah, Amy forwarded me this email yesterday, so I at least had a one-day notice. I think that with us working on our comprehensive plan right now, this is something that's definitely come up. And as we move into an open house, I kind of just wanted some more information on what exactly the opportunities were, so that if we do see a strong want for this to come out of that open house planning, that we would kind of have a way to move forward with it if it's something we wanted to look at.
Thank you. Kathy, I think you were going to say to Mayor's Association.
Well, that too, but
I was thinking it.
Yeah, technical working group.
Okay.
Is the topic for discussion. Would be some other additional communities.
Ray, can you put perhaps that on the agenda for the technical working group? This is the EDC's technical working group.
Yep.
And I am scheduled to meet or speak at the Mayor's Association meeting in October in Tremont at Jack's Cafe.
That's a good one.
Yeah, it's good food there. And I will definitely talk about this. This will be the main point of my discussion.
The other question is, to what extent, and I just haven't followed this with grants, but are communities being encouraged to purchase local lease cars, EV, vehicles for municipalities at all?
Yeah, that's one thing. I was talking to Ty Livingston this morning. I said, just wait, Ty, wait for the state procurement rules of the state bidding process to only offer EV vehicles for fleet and police and public safety. That'll be coming, I think. So I don't know if you have any comments on that, Mark.
No, I will say, I wish the IDOT people were here because I think they could give some perspective on that. Yeah. It seems like that's going to be buses, buses and, different types of municipal vehicles are all probably going to be encouraged, if not, directly told that they need to do it, but give them some sort of grants in order to be able to encourage them.
I thought, and I shouldn't do this, I shouldn't say this without having the knowledge, but I thought I read somewhere that all municipal fleets had to be converted to EV by a certain year. I thought the General Assembly had already set that.
Okay.
Which even if that has happened, I'm like, I don't know how that is feasible. Like, because if all your fleets include heavy construction equipment, all that stuff, I mean, I just feel like that technology is not there yet.
So perhaps that's some of the pushback that we're getting from the mayors, is that they're forcing this on us. It's going to be a tremendous expense and, that sort of thing.
Yes, right.
Have you, Greg, have you heard anything about that, Greg? Because you're on the highway committee in Tazewell County.
Haven't heard that. Okay.
On the county level that I'm aware of. I mean, maybe on at some other level, but
I would think the highway committee would be sort of one of the first stops there. Highway department.
I'll recheck my sources.
And I'd like to pay a compliment to Mike Newberry because this thing was very complex and how you had to basically put everything together and figure out disadvantaged communities and where, you're going to get the right kind of pictures. So, I mean, they did a heck of a job putting this thing together. Mike, I had, opportunity to watch it and it was fantastic about how well they did.
Mark, I appreciate that. And what has helped a lot though was just the coordination with Mayor Ali and the state. Like we met every Tuesday, Thursday, or something like that, and just really everybody got on the same page. So it was great team effort on everybody's part.
And it was just, and I don't know if that just all came together so very seamlessly from our standpoint. But the city had them under a master service agreement to do something. It wasn't to develop this grant, but it just sort of fell into his wheelhouse, and he took leadership over it and brought in the right people to make it very successful. And we hope it's funded.
And Elizabeth hit it on the head. They gave us, from the time this LFO came out, it was 2 months to pull together this application, which is not a ton of time, but.
And that's why I think we got a tremendous jump start on the rest of the state. And that's Brandon, and I think both Brandon and Elizabeth said there was hardly any local grant submissions for that cycle of that grant.
So what would be next steps and a deadline for next steps? So I know what I need to do is just talk to my township and schools and libraries and things like that. But what kind of data are we looking at to get more input to decide if you would want to go forward with this?
So my thought is if that there is a core group of people that want to move forward with this, we follow the Dr. Rita Ali model and set a standing meeting up every 2 weeks, and hopefully that group will grow and grow and grow to our ultimate thing. And and that's how we would get a group, a coalition together. My thought is that we need somebody to write the grant, and that's probably his firm. And so I need to procure them, but I would need to go to the commission to request the money to be able to procure a consultant to be able to do that. So maybe that's our next step is if I've got 5 or 6, we're interested, maybe sort of things, that would give me enough interest or ammunition to take to the commission to be able to say, hey, we've got a group of communities interested in this. I know the city of Pekin is interested. I think Josie jumped off, but I think the city of Pekin's interested. So if we can get 4 or 5 other communities, and better if they sit around our table at the commission level, that's probably all I need.
And the hard thing with this is, one, until we find out if we're successful or not, I really feel if we weren't, we really want to debrief because we want to know what they're looking for. I'd hate to just put our head down and run down the same path again. And
Right.
if they're looking for something different, but I would suggest that, yeah, just go back to your communities, try and figure out almost just a basic list. We'd like 4 of these type here and 4 of these type here. Just bring your community together to figure out what you want, because that's going to be the first thing that if we would do this work, we would ask you for is, what are you looking for? And then we get obviously backup information from you, but have a good idea what you're looking for and where.
Would you mind asking the commission too about counties outside of your traditional service areas, so Mason and Logan, from an EDC perspective, if they could come in on a project like this?
What do you think our reaction to that, the commission's reaction to that would be?
I represent the Greater Peoria EDC, and so we have 5 counties that we work with and try to service, Mason being one that's outside your area. And both Mason and Logan fall outside of any planning commission. Havana does, on specific needs, pay a service fee to the Western Illinois Regional Council, but that's been primarily housing assistance that they seek from the Western Illinois Regional Council. But they miss out on, all the other great things that you're doing as a commission. So if I could help bring them into this project, and I don't know how you.
I started to put you on the spot. Well, here's what I would suggest. His fee is not free. So if they're willing to pay a pro rata share to be a part of the grant writing process, I would recommend that that's the way it would be.
Yeah.
And including Chillicothe or the other communities, I don't know what the amount is. It's not exorbitant. I mean, what was your fee for the city of Peoria? If you could, it was ballpark it.
I think it was 40 to 45.
Yeah. Like that. So let's say it's $50,000. Depending on how many participants we got, if the commission would kick in half and the other communities would kick in the other half, that seems to be fair. That's sort of how we did the rail thing.
I don't know if this answers the question, but that's why we're here.
Yes.
This is a perfect project, if there's interest, but I don't know that.
I think that's fair.
I'll just say, if the inclusion of Mason and Logan make our application stronger, then heck yeah, why wouldn't we do that?
But they probably have
Low moderate.
disadvantaged
Yeah.
communities too. Because lacing in the disadvantage with the others is going to be important. This 40% rule, and that's going to be a tricky calculation.
I wouldn't say that. I think we were surprised to hear that from the private sector that St. Francis hadn't thought about that. They're in the middle or finishing a large project with proton therapy.
Right.
And they, with a new deck, and they don't have anything in there for that. And I just said, we're planning a building project in Tazewell County in the next year or two. And I don't know that we're that far, but I've never heard it mentioned, and that's right in the middle of Pekin. So there could be some cooperation, between the city and the county, it's something that I think we're just starting to think about a lot of. So,
Well,
Thank you, Rick. I got to scoot, so.
Okay.
Good seeing you
Next, Mark.
In terms of immediate next steps, we'll get an email out to everybody that attended with the information that Elizabeth has, as well as I think we're okay in sharing the city of Peoria's application.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll share that so you can sort of see what the scope of things are. And we've got a webinar slide deck from the FHWA on the grant itself. So informational things you can pass on to your communities. And I think what we'll do is try to schedule something in a month, I guess, and see who comes back and who is wanting to move forward, and then take it from there.
That will give me time to
Yes.
get this done, and that'll be perfect.
Okay.
So I can, the bigger number, the better. That's what I'm hearing.
And Kathy, if you want to reach out to your EDC communities, feel free, obviously, we'll work together on this. Greg did mention the hospital. What about sort of quasi-private, and OSF's far from quasi-private, I think they're all private, but what about not-for-profits and things like that? And
being included in it?
How are they looked upon?
I would like to check back on that, honestly. So we have a grant writer in Dewberry that did all this, and she is really well tapped into the whole federal market, and she would have a better opinion than I would.
Because I was also thinking with Fair Glen, they've got Eureka College sitting there, and it's not a public university, but same sort of thing, where I could see them, this would be a no-brainer for them. Yeah.
Right.
Clinic.
Yes.
A lot of traffic comes in and out of there. We've got El Paso and Mononk, sitting right there on a major highway.
Was that on the list, the state list, the state corridor I-39?
I don't think so. Not yet.
Is
But
it a scenic?
No.
Oh, Route 29 is through ours, is a scenic byway,
Okay.
and it goes down to Havana, that
Right.
byway does. So.
Yeah. Havana's on the Illinois River Road.
So
Right.
that would be scenic.
That would be for their leftover money. The NEVI program's leftover money, they were targeting
Yes, yes,
the
the
scenic
purple,
byway and
the
scenic
purple
routes.
areas.
Oh,
Yeah.
wait a minute. So it is. The green is that 39?
Yes, it is.
So they are on that.
I think every interstate's on there. Well, except the yellow is nominated.
So I think it's interesting that they're.
But the point of this is that we're getting four ports out of the federal program, which is not a lot.
It's not every 50. No, it's
Every
not a
50
ton.
miles.
But I think that's why they got this discretionary to kind of fill in those gaps and add. And let's agree.
But I guarantee that the state will be sort of looking at those criteria that fit, but also low and moderate income areas as well as political considerations.
Right.
So
Thanks for doing this. Thanks for
Yeah,
sharing.
no
So ultimately, I think
and again, I wish more people would have signed up, but I don't know what else we could have done. I did hear that IML's like starting tomorrow. And so
is it?
a lot of people are going up today.
Yes. So
So that may have cut us down a little bit. And I wasn't aware that, I always forget about IML.
And
Sure
because
did.
of that, just so you know, as a person who's trying to get as much work done before they leave tomorrow, it was like, do I really go to this? I was like, well, it's very important. And then I'm like, but I still have all this work to get done
And
before I leave.
your
So.
partner, she called me and said she was on her way to the hospital.
She
I hope
texted
she's going to be
me.
fine.
She's fine. In fact, this was better that I came to this portion of it. And then as we get into more grant details, then she would come into it. Yeah.
She did call.
That's wonderful.
Thank you very much. We'll
Okay.
keep in touch.
Thank you.
Thought this was good.
It was good. Yeah.
Good, very timely, and
Is she presenting at the fall? So am I assuming she's going to probably present that same stuff?
I would imagine.
Okay. So do you think the discussion is more on what we did with the
What was, yep. Yeah, and again, I don't, I think